Hello and welcome. I'm Joanna Grover, and today we're with my co-author and co-founder, Dr. Jonathan Rhodes, and Olympic rower and legend and coach, Dan Walsh. And today's conversation is how to push past those mental walls. And I don't think anyone knows that better than an Olympic rower. We could argue, John, that there are other sports, but I think rowing is one of the most grueling, and there's simply no break. So we want to get right into the conversation because we don't have much time with you, Dan. First of all, I want to thank you for being with us. I'm a big fan. And
I'm honored to be here and really enjoying the course so far. I just need more time to dig into it faster.
Yes, should mention to our audience that Dan is enrolled in our online course in imagery coaching, which is based in functional imagery training. And while it wasn't available when you were preparing for the Olympics, it's available now, so you'll be able to use it for your coaching. So I'm super excited about this journey we'll be on together. But we always start these interviews off with the same question. So I'm going to pass it over to John for that first question.
Thanks, Joe, and great to have you here, Dan. So the first question really is, what role did imagination play in your childhood as you were growing up?
I mean, I lived in my imagination, so it was front and center of my daily life. I think it still is in a lot of ways. I was the youngest of four, but there was a 10-year gap between me and my next sibling, and I didn't have many cousins, so I spent a lot of time alone. My parents were very present and loving parents, but they were dealing with three teenagers that all had very teenage issues, and some as extreme as my brother was addicted to drugs and alcohol and involved in gang violence, so a bit of a distraction. But I more or less had five adults looking out for me and kind of protecting me as best as they could from that. And in that way, it was keeping me at the house in our yard in Norwalk, Connecticut, and off to just, I had the Dragon Gang, which is all my imaginary friends, making my own currency. I joke around to this day that I inherited a swing set with no swings, but I was imagining doing flips and whatnot as a ninja, tree houses. And then, my best friend was my dog, and Trooper and Sinbad, the two dogs, definitely talk to me all the time. So imagination, which I try and instill in my own children, is it's where all the good ideas come from, and some of them become real.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to talk about one of those that became real. So as I understand it, you were not such an athletic kid when you, I think at an early age, or 12 or so, you saw the Olympics and watched rowing. So here's this skinny, non-athletic kid on the couch with a big imagination, apparently. Can you share with us what you remember about, and using your senses, what do you remember about watching that race?
Yeah, it was the summer of '96, and rowing was still super new to Fairfield County. For if there are any oarsmen or women on this call, it's now a mecca for rowing, and I was the only one in my high school doing it. Nobody had been to the Olympics from Norwalk, Connecticut in any sport, let alone rowing. And my really good friend, who was an athlete, football, baseball, the very typical suburban sports, they're sitting on the couch, and it's hot, no air conditioning, windows open, and it's cable back then, and it's the Olympics, and you just got to hope that the sport you're interested in watching is on TV. And it was this incredible race of the men's quad, so four rowers, two oars each, and they were coming down chasing the Germans. And to think about it, even politically, it was, the Berlin Wall fell in '89, and so this was '96, so it was really the second Olympics of a unified Germany, and they were the superstars. And I just remember hearing the announcer and like the words, just reverberating in my head of, "Here come the United States." And my friend kind of elbows me on this couch and says, "Isn't this the dumb sport that you do?" And I just looked at the screen, not even paying attention to him, and just visualized myself and say, "No, this is what I'm going to do." And then, they crossed the line in this close silver medal, and they show all the fans swimming the flags out to the medaling teams, and really any team. And he's like, "I'll be your flag swimmer one day." So I think the capturing of the imagination of that moment not only captured my imagination, what I could do and what I wanted to do, but even it kind of nefariously or maybe supportively went into his brain of like, man, if he thinks he can do that, I'm going to do this part. So it was really, that was the moment where I was like, I already knew that I wanted to go far in rowing because it saved my life, and you're always indebted to something that saves your life. But at that moment, I was like, let's start the process of making this happen.
Wow, I love it. Did you imagine the hard work? Because we spoke at the start, but rowing, and again, Joe, as a rower, you experience this a lot. It's a blooming tough sport, and I've seen rowers, the GB team especially, training, and it is a sport that I absolutely couldn't do. I mean, I've got little arms like a T-Rex. There's no good at all. But like the rowing, the grueling kind of hard work involved in rowing. I mean, at that young age, were you aware it's going to be a lot of hard work? Like, how did it kind of fit in that timeline?
It was, I mean, it's interesting because it kept me from becoming mischievous and, following in I was already taking candy from the bodega and selling it in school behind attention. So it stopped me from going further down that path. But my other sport was wrestling, and that was actually my first love. And so I like them both because I was really bullied as a kid. Living in that kind of environment of fear, it's just really easy to kind of become a target for that fear. And being on the water and doing the work or being on the wrestling mat, I just felt like it was building me the armor to never be bullied again. And so it didn't feel like work. I mean, it still doesn't. I think for point of reference of maybe my masochistic desire for work, one of my teammates came down to visit me, and we spent 2 days just like chopping down trees and splitting them and stacking huge piles of wood, to where my neighbor's just like, hey, you guys are pretty impressive. You want a tractor? And we're like, no. So, I mean, that's many years later, but the work is the path. Right. And so if you dread the work, you dread the path. And I never wanted to dread the path.
Yeah. So here you are working so hard. You get to the Olympics, and that first Olympics, you're on the bench, right? You're an alternate.
Correct. And I like your euphemism for spare.
So how do you handle this conversation? And we're going to take questions at the end. So I invite the audience to think about this. But how did you get beyond that? Right? Like, this conversation is about mental walls. So it's just as much mental as physical. So how did you come back from that?
I think it comes to the grueling training of that Jonathan talked about early on. Was as the youngest by that age gap, every time I whined for something, my siblings would sing, what is my prophetic song? You can't always get what you want by the Stones, but you get what you need. And I think when I was told I was going to be the alternate, there's a lot of gray area of why I was there, and it was nothing about performance. I think we wanted to ensure that we were going to win the 8, and I was just the 9th guy. And I was really upset, and I called my big sister Sue and said, I'm not going, out of pride. And she asked me a couple key questions. She said, 1, is anyone else as fast as you if something goes wrong? And I said, no. She said, 2, are you going to let your teammates down by being selfish? And I said, no. So wiped my tears off my eyes, said, thank you, and I love you. And I hung up the phone and called the coach and asked him why. Now, Mike Tatey is an Olympic medalist himself. He had already coached 1 Olympics, and he was a spare himself. And he kind of gave me the opportunity to not go. But I gave myself the opportunity that if I wasn't going to be the best rower in the world, I was going to be the best damn teammate in the world. Because high performance is all about high performing, no matter what it is that you're doing. And I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror whining about this amazing opportunity to go be part of something great. And it was just my role. And so what I did is I took all that negative energy and formed it into being the best damn spare I could be. Anything those 9 guys needed to perform and achieve, I was going to make sure they had it. And that kind of just started the cycle of I was going to do my job the best, and my job was to be the spare. It wasn't as glorious. It wasn't as memorable. But you look back at it, we're now in 2023. You have this movie, The Boys in the Boat, coming out, which is like putting rowing in the zeitgeist. And those guys will always answer my call. They still say thank you. And it's just nice to know it was a job well done. But just you don't always get what you want, but you want what you need, which is I was on the path and I didn't have to quit. So I could go for another Olympics, which I did.
I love it. I mean, I love the Stones as well, and of course they're coming back. So there you go. And I suppose that kind of takes us to like adversity. It sounds like your life's full of adversity. I suppose we could ask the question here is like, how's that shaped you? How's that prepared you for your career, and how's that kind of enabled you to overcome what seem like significantly huge challenges?
Yeah, and that question's asked a lot, and I get to do a lot of work with a good friend, RJ Cooper, who he's a man of color that found rowing in the '90s, and his the drug addiction was his familial, and we talk about this all the time because everybody has adversity and you can't scale it, right? Someone's worst adversity is their worst adversity. So mentally, emotionally, physically, that is the physiological response of hardship is hardship. So I think in some ways I was extremely loved. Where I'm very lucky is that my parents were together to the day they both passed. My siblings, despite what they were going through, did what they could to protect me. So throughout that adversity, I had a safe place to lean back onto. I knew that I was loved for me. And I think ultimately seeing the smile on my mom's face, right, every time I came home with a good story was really just the nurturing enough. And I think to put it to where I am today, like I wanted the next trophy I want, and it's the only trophy I think I ever need, is I want that world's best dad mug. So that is kind of where I put my effort into, is I want to raise two really young, strong women that feel like they have even more opportunities that I have, but it's not going to happen without having that safe place for love where they are accepted for whoever they are when they come home.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. That safe base from which to explore is so key. What would you tell kids who maybe are struggling with failure, right? You and I have had this conversation before about how coaches, how parents, how you as a parent, if your kid struggles, what advice do you give?
It's funny. It's using the imagination in reverse, actually. So a lot of what I learned, and I think I try and teach my kids or the athletes that I coach or the people that I work with, is you got to find out why you're here, like what happened. And so I think about, my father was born in 1933, was raised by people that stopped the Nazis, came to age during the Korean War, started raising kids during Vietnam War, was uneducated in the recession of the '80s. And so I think about all the stuff that he went through, and it's like he was given more opportunities to be resilient than I was for way more things on the line than just sports. And I think that's really important. My mom had to give up a baby at 16, uneducated alcoholic. So I think about where I came from, right, and what resiliency they did. And I try and put myself and be empathetic to their shoes, but also understanding as a parent, you want your kids to have opportunity and progress. So I like to use that imagination of what my predecessors had to go through, the tools they had to use, and how can I refine those tools. And I think what we're up against with younger people is that resiliency is still there, but it has to be like any part of the training program. If you're not inherently talented at it, you just have to bring the training program up to get them to that point. So if an athlete doesn't have the fitness, you have them do aerobic work to get fit. If an athlete doesn't have the strength, you have them do weight where, you don't have them going bench pressing 300 pounds on day one. You start off with 30. So I think resiliency training has to be adapted that same way. And children are incredibly resilient that we don't give them credit for. I think I had the autonomy to chase my dreams. And we don't, so much of us is grooming children to think what their dreams are, and not let them fail, not let them pressure test that dream to see if it's actually what they want. And it's just about the failure versus the resiliency from that. So what I do when I coach is I really have the athletes, figure out what they think they want to do, pressure test that. And if the failure seems to be taking them backwards, give them an opportunity to show them what they're good at. So rowing is relatively easy because to your point, Jonathan and Joe, there is a lot of different work. Everybody uses it for their cross training when they want to punish their athletes. But if they're not great on the rowing machine, well, what boat are they good in? So have them go out in a single. If they're not good at rowing, let them try. Can they do pull-ups? Can they do sit-ups? Let them feel confident in something. And that one small little goal starts to become a bigger goal and bigger goal. And so resiliency for the young people has to be taught that way now. They have school shooter drills. We did not, right? They have constant social media of how bad. We did not. So I think resiliency has to be part of that training program, and you have to dial it back to where you meet the athlete just beyond their reach so they can reach it.
Amazing. I want to. There are so many things there to unpack. I'm just mindful of time. I want to learn more about how you deal with. I think pain is probably the right word. Like the pain cave of rowing, right? I think only rowers really know what that means, as in really know what that means. When you're up against it, and your arms are screaming, your legs are screaming, and how do you keep going? Teach us. What do you do?
Find someone you care about more than yourself. So, and rowing, it's really easy. I was really fortunate to make the 8-person boat in the US because that was our priority boat. So it was like the toughest team to make. But you start to go through all that training with those guys, and you're living day to day, practice to practice to each other. And each practice be the one that advances you or the one that sets you back, dreadfully the one that cuts you. So I think the best way to describe the pain and to be mindful, I do have that gift of gab. So reel me in, Joe and Jonathan, if I go too long. But in 2008, 2 of the guys from the 04 boat that won gold together had to race each other for the last seat. And we did a time trial status. And I just confirmed this with my buddy Steve, who was here. I don't know if I can say I've consistently pulled as hard consecutively as those 2 pieces to guarantee them that there was no question other than who was better. Because failure is going to happen, just as you're not going to win everything. In fact, to win big stuff, you got to lose a lot and be ready to deal with that. You just want to know it wasn't because people didn't try around you. You want to know it was just that you lost to the better person, and you can deal with that. It's not fun. It's not like I think about the 1.2 seconds the Canadians beat us by in 2008 every day or anything, but you deal with it because nobody had a bad day in our boat. They just had a better day. And I think that's how you deal with the pain, is that you just want to make sure that nobody else is let down because you didn't try.
So it's so tricky, isn't it? It's the one day. I see it in so many sports. It comes down to that one, that one kind of day of we're gonna go head to head, and then all those years of training. It's not, people generally think it's 4 years of training. It's not. It's the lifetime of training to this point. And there's so many things. It could just be, it could be the mood. It could be you might not be feeling very well, and it comes down to that one day quite often for a lot of athletes.
I think that's why the Greeks gave 3 medals. They just threw it in there for the luck of like, all right, let's we know there's a God to look out there somewhere. They're gonna find there has to be one. Let's give them something. Give them something for the other 2 and 3. So like I said, we're really lucky. We did come from behind too. So yeah, there's friends of mine that didn't even make the team, but they're still very successful.
Amazing. And I just out of interest, how much preparation, I'm just thinking about imagery wise, like how much preparation goes into thinking about the race, like the preparation of it, and then do you also play out the actual strokes in the race? Is there kind of team imagery where you're going through scenarios and obstacles and challenges?
So our coach wasn't that much into it, so a lot of it came down onto ourselves, but a lot of it is I have a handful of friends that have become special operators in the military. And we talk about the similarities of the mindset. Some of them were oarsmen and women that they always say that rowing in college was sometimes harder than getting through some of their selections. So which I always find entertaining. But there's one common thing that we talk about when we share visualization and positive self-talk. I think those are the 2 big ones of 4. But with visualization, and I think this is where it's like last week's webinar is like, we got to get rid of that term because it's imagery. Because visualization is like, yeah, I'm going to win, and now I'm done with the work. And the reality is like, no, you got to think about what's going to go wrong. How are you going to overcome that? How does that make you feel? Right? How do you think it makes other people feel? And we train so much together because we're in training camp, that it kind of happens just through osmosis. You just know what everybody's capable of, and you just know that the people that make it into that boat on that day, something's more things have to go right than wrong. I think that's really the difference. You know, the 1% of marginal gains from Sir David Brailsford. Like, you got to hope that you had enough 1% of marginal gains to make it. But we're constantly living it at that point. So imagining it isn't necessary. Now, I don't want to say it's not necessary, but it's like it's already happening. I think we could have done more of it, but we're doing a lot of it day to day. And then the other one is the positive self-talk, especially with the young people I work with. Is positive self-talk is another one. Is like, I'm great today. And I always do this exercise when I speak, is negative emotions and negative energy is way more powerful than positive. Way more. I mean, it's evolutionary, right? Like, be afraid of the saber-toothed tiger, right? But at some type, you got to eat and go after the saber-toothed tiger. And so I say it's easily a 10-to-1 relationship. For every one negative thought, you have to have 10 positive. And that's the work that people don't do. You know, I've done times where I've made people shout out 10, 15, 20 times, I'm awesome, after just saying I suck once. And it's like that I suck resonates for so long and drags out emotionally that it takes that much I am awesome. And they're very quiet at first, and you have to coach them to build them up to be like that self-confident. So if you're not really dirt diving and visualizing both positive and negative scenarios at the same time, because you have to feel that juxtaposition of the two emotions in one session, and you're not practicing the work of the self-talk, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's all, again, the path is the work and the work is the path.
Yeah. When we look at your career, Dan, it spanned like a lot of people row, they row in high school, they row for, I just rowed my freshman year at Syracuse, and that was good for me. But you continued, like, it was middle school, high school, college, nationals, Olympics. You know, I think there's this struggle with like consistency, you know, or people burn out, you know. So how did you maintain that schedule? How did you maintain your motivation, let's say, throughout those years?
Oof. One day I'm going to die, and until I do, I'm going to keep trying. And it may sound simple, and I think people confuse simple with easy. So it's not easy, but I like pushing. Noah's my wife, but I just, you know, and it's not roses all the time. You know, I had a major panic attack this summer, first one ever, and I did the work to get through it. You know, went to my therapist. I've been doing the visualization. I meditate. I work out, and it's part of it is, I think, is because I stopped pushing. I started to get complacent and not happy with where I was because it wasn't happening to me versus going on. So it's recent, but I think that's where every time I thought about backing off, within a week or two, that feeling of not pursuing something just felt so empty. And rowing was an easy way to go after it. You know, I had a really great group of teammates and friends that wanted to do it at the same time. In some ways, I felt indebted to it. I didn't win the Olympics yet, and I wanted that perfect Hoosier story to, you know, have a movie written about me one day. Again, get what you want, not, or say you don't get what you want, get what you need. I would have been a narcissist if that happened, so I'm glad it didn't. But to me, I really am rewarded by the fact that it's difficult. Even in college, I studied athletic training and exercise physiology, and the dean of the program said, you know, Division I athletes can't do it. There's too many critical hours, let alone a rower that has no seasons off. You know, I graduated with honors. Like, I just like to just prove to myself and like I said, made mom proud.
Yeah, amazing. So we're going to switch to some of the questions now. We have quite a few coming through. A lot of comments, like people really enjoying your stories. A teenager saying that, you know, what you said about building resiliency really resonated with her. And then we have Deb Sullivan, who trained with us. who's asking, they've moved indoors, so she's out on, she's from Rhode Island, and she's curious if you have a go-to mantra, for lack of a better word, when pushing through the mental phase of the erg.
It's going to be over soon, and there's always another erg.
That's it.
It's again, I like to keep things simple. That was what my wrestling coach is my wrestling coach is my biggest mentor. Met him when I was a freshman in high school. Well, I met him when I was a child because my siblings all either were he was track and field and wrestling, but he was also the AP bio teacher, which was the toughest class in high school. He ran it like a collegiate program. Joe is, I still talk to him, and Joe always just made it really simple, but never easy. Like one of the things in wrestling, it was like, get really good at the fundamentals and you'll beat 90% of the people. Do the fundamentals better than anybody else and you'll beat 90% of the people. It's like the 10% that you can't beat. Well, those are the people you want to compete against. And so that's, to me, is stuff like ergs. Yeah, it's winter training. Everybody's doing it. Thanksgiving and Christmas, when you're training for the Olympics, those are holidays that everybody celebrates. So, the sun goes around, the sun is spinning. We're going around the sun. It doesn't care for days off. And you just got to kind of keep it simple. And if it's a bad day, you get up and you make the next one a good day. But it's hard to do. It is really hard to do. So those mantras are, this will be over soon, and there's always another one.
Yeah. I'm going to also make you repeat the best advice you've ever gotten.
The best advice is that if you're not thinking about quitting at some point during the journey, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah. So in the book, we talk about, sometimes we quit just when we're so close, so I think that that's a really important message in there, is that, and it's sort of like your coach saying, before we started recording this, you were saying your coach said at some point, you're going to really not like me, right? So that expectation was there. So you didn't expect to like this person, or that they were always going to be an amazing, friend and ally. But they set it up. But when you get to that point, you're really going to dislike me. So you were ready for it.
That's that thought process. That level setting in the beginning. When you get really good at it, and I think this comes down to using your imagination, and this comes down to the positive self-talk, and this is imagining, really trying to put yourself in a position of like, this is what quitting is going to feel like. Then when it comes there, you're ready for it. And you have some of these tools to draw out. I'm really fortunate that an athlete that actually did not make it when I was coaching him at Northeastern, felt like the rowing was too much for him in college, wound up getting into mountaineering and summited Everest, and was very kind, is that when he got back to base camp, he texted me and said, "Hey coach, I want to let you know a lot of the things that you taught me helped me get to the top of this mountain." And he said, talking to him about it, he said that the preparation of knowing that I wasn't going to like you during the winter training, especially when it was hardest, and that you were going to push me through, is that when the air started to get thin, we knew the air was going to get thin. And when that first breathing started to get difficult, was like, oh, this is the sign I'm on the way. And you turn it around and it becomes, instead of a negative thing to draw you back, it makes you realize, holy shit, I'm closer to being successful. And it energizes you because you were prepared for not liking the coach or wanting to quit. And it makes you realize, like, yeah, I'm on the way. It's here. And next thing you know, you get resiliency, right? That's where the resiliency is formed. You choose to be resilient in that moment. And it's very empowering when you realize it's your choice.
Yeah. And the images that we focus on in that moment matter. It's sort of a perfect segue to next month. We're going to be on with somebody who's not just climbed Kilimanjaro, but also climbed into the space shuttle and was, I believe, the youngest to fly the space shuttle. We're going to be talking to Commander Susan Kilrain next month and that's going to be like launching into 2024. So we're going to continue this conversation. John, I know you have something you want to add.
Oh gosh, I'm on the spot now.
No, I thought I cut you off. You don't have to add anything.
No, I've got so many questions. I was gonna. The one main question I've got is, when you're doing like a 2K, like you're on a time trial, you're putting down your baseline 2K, and you say your mantra, and you kind of use your positive self-talk, and does it go from general, like, you can do this, stick with it, to legs, through your legs? Or like, does it go from general to like something that you can action? I'm not sure whether you've been asked this before, but is it like, how does it translate into an action?
Oh, I mean, I talk about this all the time. So as you fatigue, there's like there's 4 stages, right? First is fine motor skills. So that's why what stuff that you have to think about to do well goes out the window. The next one is that long form thought. So what you're talking about is like, oh, all the narratives you're having in your head, like that goes away next. And then the third one is emotional control, where it's like just raw, like get this done, or I want to quit or give up. Like, so the fight or flight kicks in. And then it's gross motor skills, where you've pushed yourself emotionally or physically or mentally to exhaustion, and just everything breaks down, right? And the idea is like, you want to get to stage 4 on the other side of the line. Like, so yeah, in national team training, even though I was in the 8, majority of our training, 90% of it is in boats without a coxswain. So you really have to learn that stuff, and you create a language with your teammates and even with yourself. Like, it becomes very monosyllabic, right? So when you get to that emotional state where there's no long form narrative, it is legs, swing. Like, it's empowering, one word, one breath, something you can get out on the exhale, that you've practiced creating a rippling effect of energy, right? So you make that one word just incredibly powerful to break through.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm going to give you one of these questions, and then we'll wrap up. But this is a little quiz, Dan.
All right.
We have a listener asking, what's the difference between visualization and imagery?
Oof, see how far I am. All right.
Let's see. Ooh, heat is
So
on.
visualization is, to me, it's like steering in a car before you got rack and pinion steering. So it's not power steering. There's a lot of forcing that you have to do to try and keep the car on the road. To me, what I've learned about IC so far is that it's trying to get yourself as close to a Tesla, or if it needed to drive itself, it could, but you still want your hands on the wheel. And that is using as many things, whether it's your olfactory sense, your visual sense, your tactile sense. If you can get the more senses, the better you can get in there. But having your imagination, what's it going to smell like? I mean, even if you bear with me, it's like, I try to imagine my bare feet, because rowing is one of the few sports where you go right from the field of play onto the dock, onto the metals dock. I imagine my bare feet walking through the dock to that podium. I imagined the weight of the metal. I imagined having to call my mom, whether we won or lost, and just letting her know she would say she loved me. I imagined hearing my wife, then girlfriend's tears of joy, hopefully, but she would always say she cried when they said, "Why are you crying? You happy?" She's like, "No, he didn't win. He's gonna go again." But I think that's what imagery is, right? It's not just trying to have a dream; it's trying to have an experience.
Wow, John, mic drop. Dan, you're writing the next book with us. Thank you so much for this conversation. For those of you listening, you can take our course online. For the first time ever, functional imagery training is now available, self-paced online, 2 parts. And then we are also offering a live training in January where you'll get to experience it. And then after, there'll be a buddy system, and we'll review your recordings and make sure that you're utilizing imagery. Because as you said, Dan, certain things sound simple. It sounds simple, but the execution, it doesn't mean that it's a simple execution. Okay, so thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation, and we're really grateful to you, Dan. And thank you for selling me my first boat ever. You're a good salesperson too.
Thank you. Well, thank you for everybody for sharing your time. It's the only thing we can't invent. So I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All
John.
right. Bye now.